That was Burn Everything by Ludovico Technique. And joining us from the band is Ben V. Sir, welcome to Pulse of the
Yes,
Maggots. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to have you on, especially to talk about this. I know, like, Corey is very much into the industrial game. I myself, it's not something that I usually go to a lot. Perrin, I don't know about you. I feel like you are hit or miss, maybe.
Well, in and out, yeah. I mean, like I do tend to lean towards the kind of more goth leaning stuff, like get stuff that's super channeling that kind of, obviously like Nine Inch Nails, but going back to more of that kind of Bauhaus Sisters of Mercy thing. Like I do like to lean into. So yeah.
Yeah. So we have all different heads of music over here, Ben. Why don't you just start off telling me about how Burn Everything kind of came together, and then I think Corey's got some questions for you as far as like the singles approach that you've been taking with the most recent releases.
Yeah, I think this particular song. So like I've released, I think this is the sixth single, which would be from a full length album, but I decided to, and we'll get into this, I guess, in a second, like break it up. But it's interesting because this particular song, so everybody, if you just happen to listen to this, it's not, it's like, this is kind of harkens back to a style that we used to do a lot more. And instead of writing an entire album of this material exactly like this, I figured that I'd write at least one song or a couple songs like this one. And then some of the other tracks on the album, honestly, and Corey can attest to this, they don't exactly sound just like this one, but I figured that this one's probably vocally the most aggressive with the harsh vocals and stuff like that. So it would be a little bit more akin to being, kind of towards this audience here. So that's why, so bringing this, so Burn Everything, this particular song, I think that when I wrote this, it really was at the beginning of the pandemic, and it really was kind of the idea that what's going to happen, and just really you're everything that you would we all had our own different experiences, and I think that some of us who may have already had, I think even for people who have perfect existences, it would have been a rough time. And then for those of us who already struggle with certain, maybe, maybe life isn't so normal to begin with, throwing that sort of gigantic wrench into the whole flow of things really just shook everything up for all of us. And I think that this was sort of just a, I don't know. I don't want to say it's like it, I think that the emotions that were like culminating were really allowed to explode in this manner due to that. There's like a pressure. It was like more like a pressure cooker kind of thing. I wouldn't say that the song's about the pandemic. There have been a lot of fans that have been like, "Hey, is this about COVID or something?" I think that it's not really about it as much as it has been fueled by having to face those thoughts from within because of it, right?
Yeah, and I think you can tell at least part of that in there with, the harsh vocals and stuff like that. Like that, Corey mentioned it when we were kind of talking off air and stuff like that, but the vocal delivery reminds me like a little like Rob Zombie-esque, right? Like not 100% there, but that kind of like harsh type of sound, which, for me, like conveys that rage, that uncertainty, that those emotions that you're speaking of.
And it's strange because like on some of the other tracks, I do sing in like a deep baritone voice. And then this one is like this distorted, aggressive voice. So I think that when it comes to different songs, you really have to just go with emotionally whatever an artist can write a song about anger or a song about anxiety or a song about this subject over and over again. But every single time, it's going to come out a little differently, and it's going to just be a different expression. People often ask me like, "Hey, what's the favorite song you've ever done?" And that's kind of like picking your favorite finger, or if you have a bunch of children, like your favorite child or your favorite cousin, or they all have their own identity and they all have their own place. And there's not really one that's above the other. So this particular song is kind of a very important snapshot of that particular way. Like you could probably, another person can take those same emotions in the way that I express them with this, and it might sound completely different, but still have that same resonating emotional feeling and still be able to like connect with people out there on an individual level, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
And-
so sorry.
I'll let you ask your question.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say with the what you're talking about there, with the kind of obviously the I guess the realities of kind of day to day in recent years, kind of feeding into the song, but obviously being something that's very kind of goth leaning. You've got the kind of religious imagery with obviously burning. You've got that in the kind of sound sense with the big kind of exaggerated kind of church choirs and stuff like that. I guess you could relate that as well to a little bit of almost black metal influence in some of the harsher vocals and stuff. I guess how natural is it for you to, I guess, relate some of those more mundane, shall we say, day-to-day experiences with this incredibly, again, grandiose way of putting that into a song?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you kind of nailed it. It's like so those of us who do this sort of thing, and you all who are part of this community and really help it all. I think that taking like the choir sounds like you were talking about, or these concepts that make it sound very grand, and you're talking about emotions that when all is said and done really could, if you strip it all away, it's just you, your mind, your feelings. There's no choirs. There's none of that. So you do have to, it's a very good question. You do have to sort of decide in this particular way of doing things for this song, how am I going to express these emotions this time? So this time I felt that it was best to really, we're talking about burning down. Yeah. And kind of like the church and the cover art and all that you mentioned. I think that I thought, well, let's just go for it, right? And so let's make it as grand as possible, epic as possible, angry as possible. If I write this
Inferno,
yeah, exactly. That's exactly what the cover is, right? So just as grand as possible for these emotions, and then in another year, I could write a similarly emotionally like based song and go a completely different route. So this time around, I wanted to explore those sort of the imagery there. It's not really something I do every time. So like, let's say if some artists, they live and they find their niche and they find kind of their identity and they really latch onto that. Now, I have nothing against that. Like, I think that obviously there's safety there, there's establishment there. For me though, like personally, if you were to listen to another Ludovico Technique song, you might be like, whoa, this is completely different from that Burn Everything song. And then much like I think someone brought up like Sisters of Mercy or old school industrial and goth and stuff, like, yeah, so this obviously doesn't sound like Sisters of Mercy, but then other songs I have might sound like, well, like I said, where I sing with more of a baritone, like clean voice. And you might go, oh, that was Ben, that was Ben V. I think it's just because when you create something like that, you have to do things that you enjoy. Like I know so many artists, so many musician friends, and they behind the scenes, they talk about like, hey, we wish that we could do something a little different, but we're afraid to step out of what we're kind of known for this. And I always say, you have to do what makes you happier, and people they'll thank you for it, because if you're genuine and they feel it, that it's coming from your heart and your the core of your being, they'll follow you wherever you go, as long as it's genuine, I think.
Sorry, Corey, I didn't want to.
Oh no, I was just waiting to make sure nobody else had anything first.
Yeah, that Zoom lull. Yeah, that
Zoom lull. Yes.
Far away.
But no, yeah, that is actually something that I really appreciate about how you are. Is you're very genuine with everything that you do, and you're also very like involved. Isn't really the right word, but you're very supportive when it comes to your fans and your fan base. You're very engaging. And you seem to genuinely care. But how do you find that kind of balance between being, the dark and the spooky, but also being, honestly, this kind of uplifting presence in the community?
Well, I mean, I think that one thing to remember is having a certain energy about you. There is no expectation for, like, dark and spooky is only dark and spooky if you're afraid of that sort of thing. And if you're afraid of a presence of that nature, I think that the way that I can get away with being what would so-called be positive, or I would say at least encouraging, is that force, that presence is more like a encouraging presence and a positivity through constructive outlets. And so here's what I mean by all this. Let's say someone has anxiety, let's say someone has a depression, all these things that kind of lead one to maybe go down the path of being a little different from your average American, like citizen out in the world. Maybe they find metal as an outlet. Maybe they find industrial music, goth music, dark things. Maybe not, but maybe they do. So I think that the best thing to do is to encourage the fan base to say, hey, you may have some problems. You may have some things that get in the way of making day-to-day life as easy as it could be. However, it doesn't mean that you can't still constructively get things accomplished. And I think that you can't let people try to get in your way. Like, essentially, that you'll get through it. And you always will. You either, I mean, because the truth is you either will or you won't, right? So you probably will until you won't. And then you don't really have to worry about it. So I think that encouraging people to express themselves and feel things constructively. So there's a way, like even the type of music that we're all into, right? Like there's always this kind of, oh, this is years ago, the idea that this, if you listen to this sort of music, whether it be metal or what brand of metal or goth music or dark music or whatever, like that, like listening to it on its, like that alone would lead you to down this terrible world. And I think that that's couldn't be further than from the truth. And the reason is because when you hear those emotions expressed in a constructive way, because music is the sort of thing that's just a wholly good, regardless of even if in the songs you're expressing anger or pain, you're just expressing feelings. So feelings will always be constructive because they're not you moving to action of some terrible thing. So with that said, it means that essentially you should encourage like finding things that speak to you on a level that are constructive. So music's constructive. So when it comes to the fan base, I always try to be encouraging of being constructive with what would otherwise be destructive emotions. So that's what I would say. That's what that really comes down to. So it's not like a balance. Like I'm not like, oh no, if I'm encouraging, it's against my persona. No, my persona is encouraging, but it's just not encouraging in this like way that might be typical. You know, it's a different type of encouragement.
Did either one of you have a question before I keep going?
You
the Zoom lull again.
Yeah. I was just, we're just making sure we're just like getting everybody's timing around. It's like that scene in The Office where everybody is just like pointing their fingers at each other. Yeah. Like, are you going to go? Who's going? No, take one more. I do have something tangentially related to that, but I think you can go first, Corey.
Mine is a completely different question. So if you've got something that's tangentially related, you go.
Great. So like Ben, you talked about how, obviously your music has evolved over the course of like the several years that you've been doing this. You mentioned how songs on, these past releases that you've done may sound a little bit different depending on how you're feeling or what was going on with that. I'm curious on like what in your mind, and this, maybe there's not one thing, maybe there's a few things, but what in your mind are like the fundamental aspects that are present, that you think should be present when you're constructing Ludovico Technique songs?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think that, so let's put it this way. Most Ludovico Technique songs are based essentially on the idea that you are expressing a probably to a certain extent, rather extreme emotion, even if and when I say extreme, I know I'm on a metal podcast. I have to yeah, I have to explain what I personally mean. Extreme as far as an emotional sensation, maybe not the most brutalist of words, but just the sensations being rather extreme. I think that, let's put it this way, I'll be really honest. Like, if I were to be a completely normal person, if all of a sudden tomorrow I were to wake up and I would feel like I felt like your average citizen, I don't think I'd continue doing Ludovico Technique. I think that I think that doing Ludovico Technique is sort of like that constructive outlet for expressing those types of things. And I think that while no one owes me anything, and, you know, I don't really owe anyone anything, I think that doing your best job to express yourself genuinely, release after release or from song to song, people are going to either pick up on that, and they're going to take that journey with you. And then maybe in years to come, if all of a sudden you're like, hey, what happened to Ben from Ludovico Technique? They stopped releasing stuff. He's like, oh, he must have been cured. He did it, you know, or something like that. Like, he released as many songs as he needed to before he just became, I don't know, he was all done. I think that most, we all, I mean, I'll be really honest. I think we all know a bunch of artists that are some of our favorite artists from the years past that we kind of wish felt that way. But they keep going for one reason or another. And I think that so the question originally is like, how do I keep it Ludovico? I think the best way to do it, that is to just know that it's there as my release, and it's essentially there as something that's constructive, as I was saying in the last question, in what would otherwise be destructive emotional expressions. So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you for answering that. Corey, I'm going to flip it back to you.
Alrighty, and that kind of leads into the, you know, since we were talking about releasing music, into your release strategy that you have, where you're not releasing an album, but you're going, you know, singles every month or so. And I had two questions on that one. One, are you composing as you go, or are all the songs kind of planned out? And what made you want to go with that release strategy? Because it is so different from really any of the release strategies in any of the scenes.
Right. Yeah, because in the industrial scene, everyone loves, and the goth industrial scene, everyone loves albums. I think in the metal scene, most of the time, most people would love albums. I think that in the alternative scene and the rock scene, obviously in the pop scene and the hip hop scene, they're doing singles. And I thought to myself, hey, I'd had an entire album. Well, here's what happened. Like, I started writing, and I wanted to just sort of release like maybe a single or an EP. But what happened was COVID happened, and then I just kept writing, and it ended up being an album's worth of material. And it had gotten a little backed up to where I hadn't started releasing any of the material yet. And then I just had this concept. I was like, let's just go full on release them one by one. Who knows what's going to happen? COVID could be 5 months, 2 months. You know, you remember back to last year or whatever it was, February, March. I mean, we didn't know if this
by summer.
June. We'll be out running around by June.
Right. So I thought this. Well, see, I'm the opposite. So I'm glass half empty. So I'm like, well, this could be 10 years. I don't know. So right. So I'm like, all right, well, let's just start releasing the singles and see kind of where that goes. Now, once I started doing that and saw that the support, the way that the fans were interacting with those releases was in such a different way than anything that I had done before. And I knew then that I had not stumbled. I mean, I'm not the first person to do this. Obviously, people like Billie Eilish and stuff like that in pop world do that all the time. But I had realized that this was something I really enjoyed doing because, and I don't know, Corey, if you're going to ask me what more you're going to ask me regarding this, but I'll just kind of say.
Feel free to answer my questions before I ask them. It's totally fine. John steals my questions, so it's all good.
True.
So, you know, as someone, when you write music, and even as a fan of music myself, obviously we know when we get an album sometimes, It'll have 12 songs in it, 13, whatever. And then, you know, sometimes there's song number 7 or 8 that kind of maybe we don't really listen to all that much. Like we know it, but it kind of gets a little glossed over. I think as someone who writes music, and especially if you believe in what you do, like you're not just kind of throwing stuff out there just to do it, but you believe in what you write and you really genuinely are expressing something from the core of your being. I think that doing releases this way really allows each emotional output to have its day in the sun. And even if for a few weeks, so let's say like you do like a once a month release, or let's say you do every 6 weeks or even every 8 weeks, I think that allowing that one song, so we have albums, right? And when we play live, you know, if we wanted to play a track like, you know, track 11 or track 8 that's on one of the albums, people, you could see the crowd are kind of like, we know this one, but not as well as the other ones, right? So I think that that's always a little disappointing, because especially if you do put your heart and soul into every single song, you know, I understand that if you have 12 songs and you're going to take an entire year to release them like once a month over 12 months, there's going to be some that, you know, fans are like, I don't know about this one this month, but luckily they'll at least have a moment to enjoy it. And then if, you know, so let's say Burn Everything that you just played, there's probably some fans that have heard some of the baritone voice stuff that I was talking about, that's the more Sisters of Mercy kind of sounding, that they're probably like, whoa, this is way too aggressive for me. Or let's say if people have gotten in on Burn Everything and then the very next one I'm singing differently or something, they might go, oh, you know, not really into this, I really like that. But to me, that's exciting, because it's constantly moving. It's keeping your brain engaged. It's exciting to me. I think that singles, you could be a little bit more, when you're releasing singles from month to month, people's moods change, the seasons change. If people live in certain areas where the seasons actually do change, you have different feelings and moods and emotions throughout the year. Something will hit a bit different to you if you get it in November than you would if you did get it in June. And so if you're releasing material and it is a little different throughout the year, people are a lot more willing to accept things that are different. If you get an album and there was Burn Everything and then, you know, some acoustic song or something, I don't know, like that wouldn't fly, I don't think. But in singles, you can do stuff like that. I'm sorry if I'm rambling. I could talk about this subject forever because I love it, you know.
It's better than just not like one word answers. Yes, no, yes, no, yeah.
Singles are good. Bye.
I like music.
I like music. I write music. Goodbye.
But wouldn't that be more kind of goth? Because it'd be super mysterious, like
super mysterious.
Yeah, I got to keep it super mysterious.
So Corey, did you have I think before we're gonna have to start getting into new music pretty soon. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna be that dude to put the kibosh on this conversation. It sounds like we could probably go for like 3 hours, which
probably
sorry Keem, we're just gonna bleed into your show today. It's Labor Day over here, fine. But Perrin, I wanted to make sure that you didn't have anything else to follow up with or anything like that.
I'm not one to stand in the way of efficiency today, but yeah.
Amazing. Corey, do you want to ask the last question? Because I know you've got one.
The most important question of the day. What is your favorite dinosaur?
My favorite dinosaur. How many, I mean, there was thousands, right? Upon thousands to choose from. And I probably know about 3 in my head, right?
What's the most goth dinosaur?
Well, we
asked that off the air, actually.
Well, so I don't know if this could be an answer, but the most goth thing about dinosaurs is that they're extinct and they're all dead. So there you go. There's my answer. My favorite is
the dead ones.
No, I mean just mass extinction. That's my favorite dinosaur, which is not a dinosaur. I know I'm kind of cheating here, but that's the only answer. Oh, because Stegosaurus, I mean, who wants to hear that? Mass extinction, that's exciting.
Well, we know what your next single is going to be.
Mass extinction.
Stegosaurus.
Yeah. Amazing stuff, Ben. It was so good to hear from you. We will probably have you on again, my friend, because of just the conversations that I feel like we could have if we were not, constrained by time. I mean,
Sure.
time doesn't even exist anymore nowadays. But it was so good to hear. Yeah,
time is such a passé subject.
There you go. But it's so good to have you on here, my friend. Good to hear your words. And congratulations on releasing yet another single. We will live this one for a little while, and then soon, I imagine we'll have another one down the pipe to talk about.
We will actually. It's September. This month is a weird month. The Burn Everything came out September 3rd, this past Friday. The next one actually comes out September 29th. Amazing.
There you go.
All right.
You're gonna be surprised if you actually hear it. It's gonna be, you'll be like, whoa, that's what he sounds like when he's singing. Because I actually am singing clean on the next one. But
yeah, we are looking forward to it, my friend.